8th segment of our 12-part series, Healthy Heart, the Wise Woman Way, with Susan Weed at Time Monk Radio. Hello, Susan. Welcome to Time Monk Radio.
Hi, Gemini. I'm delighted, as always, to be with you again.
Thank you for joining us.
Well, here we are into our third month of having a healthy heart. Who would have ever thought that there could be that much to say about it? And I have to admit that having spent now the better part of a year looking into this and reading things, that there is so much more that needs to be said and that could be said. You know, we started off in our first month with the basics. What is your heart? What is your cardiovascular system? Let's think about the heart as a muscle. Let's think about the muscles in the blood vessels and blood pressure. How do we deal with that? And, of course, those are all archived and available, as well as information on many specific herbs. I think that we talked about blueberry and motherwort and hawthorn and honey and probably pomegranate and passion flower. And then in our second month together, we moved into the understanding that the heart is more than just a muscle. It's more than just a pump. It is actually a feeling and remembering organ that in fact the heart and the brain are perhaps more closely linked in function than we have thought about. And we really got into herbs and foods that could help us to have a feeling heart, to have a good heart, to have a more open heart. And we talked about chocolate, and leafy greens and nuts and olive oil and roses and astragalus and lemon balm, just a whole bunch of wonderful things. And so now we have come to the culmination. And you notice that in each one of our units, I really focus on one particular thing. So in the first month, we're really focused not just on learning about the heart and the cardiovascular system, but about blood pressure. Because blood pressure is really easy for anybody to measure at home. It's a very interesting measurement, and we can really do something about it. So that was kind of our primary focus. And then in our second month together, we focused on inflammation. It's not so easy to do at-home tests of inflammation. As a matter of fact, the best tests of inflammation are hardly even available to your doctors. But there are more generalized ways to see inflammation. I have a little bit of poison ivy right now, and the way that poison ivy expresses itself on me is very small red bumps on my skin, which the first day or two itch mildly. And this is what I would expect to see when there are not inflammatory markers in the body. And I get to see this a lot because a lot of people come and live with me and apprentice with me, and I see what happens when they get bitten by mosquitoes or get into the poison ivy and the inflamed reaction they have and what happens to them as they eat a whole foods diet, drink nourishing herbal infusions, and stop consuming things that are inflammatory, and how generally within 8 to 12 weeks they are having non-inflammatory reactions to these kinds of what we might call small stressors. In our third month together, we are going to encounter the third big topic when it comes to cardiovascular health, and that is cholesterol. And there is so much to be said about cholesterol and the various forms of cholesterol, and should they be high or should they be low, and then, of course, statin drugs that I don't know if we're going to be able to get through it all in a month. But let's jump in and see what we can find out, because, of course, cholesterol is a fat, right? It's a health-promoting fat that is critical for brain development in infants, as well as for building strong cell walls throughout the body and the brain. Cholesterol aids in the digestion of fats. It itself is a fat, and it controls the production and the utilization of a great many hormones. Cholesterol is certainly associated with saturated fat in animal products such as meat and dairy products, but it is also found in things like shrimp and lobster. So if we want to really understand cholesterol, we need to start by, shall we say, decriminalizing it or taking it out of the mugshot poster. I was once teaching at a conference, and someone came up to me in the crowd of people that often comes after a presentation where there's a lot of people in the audience, and people want to have a word with you or just say hi to you or get you to sign their book. And this person kind of grabbed me and whisked me off, and she said, "I want to look at your blood." And, well, of course, I was very taken in by, oh, she's paying attention to me, and she wants to see something about me. Who wouldn't be? And she took a drop of blood from my finger with a lancet, and she put it on a slide, and she put it under a microscope that was connected to a monitor so that you could see it on a TV screen. And there's various things. She says, oh, there's your white blood cells and there's your red blood cells. She says, oh, look, you have cholesterol in your blood. And the way she said it was like, I found the meanie. I found the bad thing. Right? And I said to her, I'm so glad I have cholesterol in my blood. That means I'll be able to think well for a long, long time. Well, I don't have to tell you that what was really going on here was that she sold a special line of things, supposedly to deal with cholesterol and a huge variety of other things. And she was going to look at your blood so that she could convince you to buy the products that she was selling, which, in my case, didn't work out. Cholesterol is not just one thing. And cholesterol is many things. You probably already know that. You probably already have a sense because you've heard about low-density cholesterol and high-density cholesterol, and you've heard about total cholesterol, and you've probably even heard about triglycerides. So these are different forms of cholesterol, LDL, low-density lipoproteins. Now, lipo means fat. So what this means is these are fatty proteins, high-density lipoproteins, HDL, and triglycerides. Since we are decriminalizing cholesterol, what we're starting to see is that, well, of course, that would be just silly to say that cholesterol was bad, since there's actually parts of cholesterol that are critically important for health. And yet there might be parts of cholesterol that we want to have in lower amounts and parts that we want to have in higher amounts. So in a very simplistic way, LDL should be low. The L is for low. And HDL, high-density lipoproteins, should be high. Isn't it nice that it works out that way? Oh, low density should be low, and high density should be high. Low density lipoproteins, LDL, truly in and of themselves are not a problem, but they get oxidized pretty easily. And because they're low density, unlike the high density lipoproteins, they can very easily kind of be broken down by oxygen and oxygen reactions. And when they break down, they cause inflammation. And this is a very low-level inflammation. Nonetheless, it is inflammation. And that inflammation is basically what causes cholesterol to form plaques in the blood vessels. We talked about this in one of our other weeks about the idea that there are certain things, especially certain fats like trans fats, which actually injure the blood vessels. And when the blood vessels are injured by trans fats or by the oxidation of LDL, cholesterol comes in rather like a scab to repair it. So you think about it. You get cut, and your body heals that cut But in order to heal the gut and to protect it and kind of hold it together while the healing process is taking place, your body forms a scab over it. And as the healing takes place from underneath, that scab basically is pushed off. And that works just fine on your skin. But in your blood vessels, it doesn't work out fine because that scab is called a plaque. And that plaque, if it is broken loose, can cause a stroke or a heart attack. So basically what we want to focus on is not injuring our blood vessels, right? Making sure that LDL is not oxidized. And we're going to be talking about some foods and some lifestyle techniques that can help bring low-density lipoproteins down, but even more importantly, counter oxidative stress on low-density lipoproteins. HDL is thought to be helpful and protective. This is why we want more HDL. And again, the very simplistic understanding of this is that total cholesterol is LDL plus HDL plus triglycerides. And if there's more HDL, then there has to be less LDL. And so having more of the less oxidatable lipoproteins protects our heart and our blood vessels. Now, if you've ever had a cholesterol test, you know that the numbers on the test can really be intimidating, right? So most people nowadays, when they go to the doctor says, well, we need for you to come in for a fasting blood draw so that we can look at your cholesterol and look at your numbers. And your doctor is going to want your numbers to conform to certain standards. The current standards are that HDL should be above 60 milligrams per deciliter, and that triglycerides should be less than 100 milligrams per deciliter, and that the ratio of total cholesterol to HDL should be less than 3.3. Furthermore, total cholesterol at this point, most doctors are looking to have in a range of 200 milligrams per deciliter or less. What if your numbers aren't like this? You have to decide if it's really in the best interest of your health to conform to these numerical standards. Remember, half the people in any given year who have a heart attack have all these numbers within normal ranges. So having these numbers in normal ranges, having your cholesterol under 200, having a good ratio of total cholesterol to HDL, having your triglycerides at a good place, this does not mean that your heart is healthy or that you won't have a heart attack. Half the people who have a heart attack have healthy numbers. However, those people who are having heart attacks with healthy numbers don't have healthy numbers when it comes to inflammation. And that's what we talked about last month. We talked about one of the big three of cardiovascular health, and that is inflammation. How do we counter inflammation? So that is why we paid attention to that before we started talking about cholesterol. Because even though cholesterol is getting all the press, even though cholesterol is what people are interested in, of these three important topics, high blood pressure or blood pressure, inflammation, and cholesterol, cholesterol is really the least linked to heart problems. And I know that's a staggering thing to hear. For most people, what causes heart disease is cholesterol. Cholesterol comes from meat and dairy products. It's a very simple equation. You become a vegetarian and your heart is healthy. Or, as one very mean-spirited person said, well, you see, ex-President Clinton had to have a bypass procedure. That's because he used to eat French fries. Total cholesterol is not a problem, not even when it is high. What we want to look at is what is the inflammatory status and what is the ratio of LDL to HDL. So remember that our goal is not necessarily to lower total cholesterol, but to make HDL higher and LDL lower. So it's recommended by everyone, it seems, the simple expedient of reducing the ingestion of saturated fats and cholesterol as in a vegetarian diet is unlikely to really make much change in terms of lowering cholesterol. How come? Because your liver is busy making cholesterol. Remember that cholesterol is critically important to health and especially to brain health. We're not going to depend on the success of the hunt to keep our brain healthy. We're going to make our own cholesterol. And people who generally have very high cholesterol readings, you find that goes in their family and that their livers are churning out a lot of cholesterol. Also, more to the point, and this is sometimes difficult to discern in the studies that are done, there is a very big difference in terms of heart health between pasture-raised meat and feedlot meat. There's a very big difference in terms of heart health between the dairy products from animals that are out on pastures and those that are fed silage. Basically, what I'm saying is that industrial meat and dairy are actually high in inflammatory compounds, and they cause inflammation and oxidation throughout the body. And as we're seeing, it is that combination of the blood vessels being a little stiff, the blood vessels getting injured, the oxidation of LDL, which also injures the blood vessels, and then the cholesterol coming and making a scab, and that scab getting dislodged and causing big problems. So what we're finding as the studies become a little clearer and a little finer is that it is not so much the saturated fat in these products as it is the way that the meat and dairy are produced, and the animals are being fed large amounts of soy and corn, which cause there to be inflammatory compounds in the meat and the milk, which then add to our inflammatory load. Buying only organic or pasture-raised dairy and meat, and that's really the big thing that I am seeing in stores these days. The organic certification is quite hard, and some of the rules are really complex, and I know friends who basically are organic farmers, but they won't do it according to the standards because they're just a little nuts. So what's being sold now is pasture-based. And that means animals that are out and eating real grass. And generally they are antibiotic-free and hormone-free as well. So buying only organic dairy and meat is going to help our hearts in two ways. First of all, it's going to reduce the amount of meat that you eat. It's going to reduce the amount of butter that you eat because that stuff is expensive. And that's great. And it's also going to improve the omega-6, omega-3 ratio in your diet. Reducing, or better yet, eliminating partially hydrogenated and hydrogenated fats is far more important than eliminating or even reducing the amount of saturated fats. Now, there are a lot of really excellent studies showing that when we replace saturated fats with polyunsaturated fats, there is a drop in heart disease. It is, however, not a really huge drop in heart disease. However, when we look at people who eliminate trans fats from their diets, the reduction in heart disease is staggeringly large. So much so that right now in the year 2014, it is being considered to actually ban trans fats from foods. The link between trans fats, which are from partially hydrogenated and sometimes hydrogenated fats, with heart disease, stroke, heart attack, is not questioned anymore. It is so clear. So how do you do that? Well, basically, you stop eating commercially prepared things and you limit the amount that you eat out. So again, we're making some really major lifestyle changes for many people in suggesting that all the meat and all the dairy that you eat be pasture-raised or organic, and that you do far more cooking at home. But that's the way to a healthy heart. Replace some of the meat you're eating with beans. Replace some of the meat that you're currently eating with fish. But don't replace any of the dairy products with what I call fake dairy products. Beans are a real food, right? If we say, hey, 2 dinners out of the week, instead of it being based around meat, I'm going to base it around beans and fish, that will make a difference in the heart of your health. But if you switch from real dairy products to the fake dairy products, and I call them fake because they're made in laboratories, you are not going to get the same kind of increase in cardiovascular health. If you're worried about your cholesterol level, I really suggest that you refine your focus and instead worry about your triglyceride level. High triglycerides are very strongly linked to cardiovascular disease. In fact, those with triglyceride levels above 100 milligrams per deciliter at the beginning of a recently reported study were 50% more likely than those with lower levels to have a heart attack, need bypass surgery, or angioplasty, or die over the course of the next 18 years. So be sure to ask, what's my triglycerides? Now, I could not talk to you about cholesterol without giving you some information on statins. Statins change your numbers. So remember I said that your doctor is going to recommend that you get some numbers for your cholesterol, and then your doctor is going to want to change those numbers, and statins are the drugs that do that. They actually change the total amount of circulating cholesterol. However, as more and more people take statins, doctors get a more and more distorted idea of what constitutes a healthy cholesterol level, and the total cholesterol that they're aiming for gets pushed down and down and down. Again, we're not finding that it is cholesterol that's the problem, but inflammation, triglycerides, and oxidation of LDL. The package insert for the top-selling statin drug in the world with $11.5 billion in sales says that 3% of those taking the placebo had a heart attack, and 2% of those taking the drug had a heart attack. That's only a 1% difference. In other words, taking the drug over taking a placebo will only make 1% difference. It doesn't make that big a difference. Lifestyle and food makes a bigger difference. I've never seen any study showing benefit for women taking statins. One study found a positive relationship, in fact, between cholesterol and longevity. The higher the woman's cholesterol level after the age of 70, the longer she lived. In a meta-study done at the San Diego School of Medicine, looking at statin drugs, there were over 900 studies specifically focused on the adverse effects of statins. In other words, these weren't studies where they somehow, surprise, surprise, found a side effect. No, these were studies studying the side effects, over 900 studies studying the side effects of statins, the most common of which are muscle weakness, cognitive problems, and tingling in the extremities. And I don't really think we need to go beyond muscle weakness when we remember from one of our very first classes that the heart is a muscle. Why would we take a drug to change our cholesterol level when we know that it makes muscles weaker and that the heart is a muscle? All right. We're going to spend some time this week and next week looking at how we can lower cholesterol, how we can lower triglycerides, specifically with herbs, food, and other lifestyle changes. And I have an A list and a B list and a C list. And that A list, of course, is, wow, this is what I'm doing. This is what I think is the best. And then the B list is, well, if you can't do that. And the C list is, yes, well, you could do that. But before we are done this week, and we'll get started on those next week on the A, B, and C lists, I want to talk to you about one of my favorite herbs for the heart. And it's just become a favorite herb for me in the past few years as more and more information has come out about it. I will tell you that I've always had a kind of personal like for this herb, and it's called hibiscus or roselle. But I never, really felt like it was really good. It was just like, ooh, I really liked this because it's red and it's sour, and I like red, sour things. And I really got into drinking it in Germany in a tea blend of rose hips and roselle and a little bit of honey. Oh, it's just wonderful. But studies are coming up fast and furious here on roselle, really showing us that it is phenomenal for the heart. Roselle has been used in folk medicine to help those with heart disease, hypertension, and disorders of circulation. The phytonutrients in roselle have now been identified as very important in lowering blood pressure, decreasing spasms, including spasms in the blood vessels and the heart, and in killing bacteria, which of course can cause inflammation. Extracts and infusions of roselle can significantly alter blood vessel disease, blood sugar, lipid content, and blood pressure. That's just what we want for a healthy heart. Roselle lowers blood pressure. Studies find that drinking 3 cups of roselle tea a day is as effective in lowering blood pressure as taking an ACE inhibitor. You need to hear that again. Hibiscus tea, you can go out to any store and buy hibiscus. You make it like you make any tea. You put a couple of, it looks like flowers, but it's actually the calyx. This doesn't really matter. Drop a couple of those into a cup. Pour boiling water over it. Let it steep. You'll see it turns red almost instantly. 3 to 5 minutes. Put a little honey in it. Drink it down. Wow. Do that 3 times a day. That's as good as taking an ACE inhibitor and a lot better for your body. The effects were especially pronounced in those who were pre-hypertensive or mildly hypertensive. Studies confirm that roselle also has a diuretic activity, but it did not lower serum potassium levels, and it did not have mineralocorticoid effects, which are frequent detrimental side effects from taking blood pressure-lowering drugs. Tori Hudson, a wonderful naturopathic doctor, reports that a Cochrane review published in 2010 looking at the effects of roselle on blood pressure found 5 articles that met their stringent standards, all of which found significant reduction in blood pressure among those drinking roselle. Roselle lowers cholesterol. Cholesterol was reduced by up to 15% after 1 month in up to 75% of those consuming roselle. The optimum dose appears to be, again, 3 cups of tea a day. In a group of diabetic women, 1 cup of hibiscus tea morning and night for a month increased HDL by 17%, reduced total cholesterol by 10%, and decreased LDL by 8%, and most importantly, triglycerides by 15%. The control group, interestingly enough, drank black tea, known to be good for the heart, and only those drinking the hibiscus showed these changes. Roselle also counters metabolic syndrome. People with metabolic syndrome have significantly reduced glucose, total cholesterol, and LDL, and increased HDL after using hibiscus tea for only a month. Wow, here we have come to the end of another wonderful time together. And I'll be back with you next week to talk more about A Healthy Heart, the Wise Woman Way, here at Time Monk Radio. Thank you so much, Gemini.
Thank you, Susan. This completes the 9th segment of our 12-part series, Healthy Heart, the Wise Woman Way, with Susan Weed at Time Monk Radio.